How would you feel if your sister did that to you, right? Haven't you all done that? And what answer do you get? Right? You get a totally empathic, insightful response. You get, I don't care. Why is she such a wuss? What's the big deal? I didn't want that cake anyway. It's a stupid present. And the reason you get that is because you're teaching empathy at exactly the wrong time. You're trying to teach empathy at a point in time when your child's defensive. And when, if they let their guard down and admit, I'd be devastated if anyone did this to me, they know they're getting grounded for several months. So they're not going to admit it at that time. When we need to be teaching empathy is in calm moments, is when we're sitting side by side and watching a TV show and we can say, wow, this is really powerful. How would I feel if that happened to me? When we're doing Parshat HaShavua and we say, can you imagine what it must have been like? Like you don't know what minute you're going to be leaving Mitzrayim. You've got to pack up. That's it. I mean, we just had the yontif that we have, a chiyuv, we have a requirement for empathy is Pesach. We must feel that moment as if, I get chills every year when I do it at the Seder. When our Seder, we go around and each person will read different segments. And always, hi, good evening. I'm always somehow get lucky that I read, B'kol dor v'dor, that in every generation you must see yourself as if you yourself went out from Mitzrayim. And every time I just get chills. It's such, to me, an empathic catalyst to think about this. We can be teaching empathy all the time. I think we do a much better job when our children are young, because when they're little, we do read-alouds with them all the time. We read storybooks, and it's so natural for us to say, why is the man in the yellow hat mad at Curious George? How is he feeling? What do you think is going to happen next? What did Curious George do? How can you tell? Well, then they start reading like books that we can't stand, Twilight or whatever, and we don't read them anymore, and we don't read aloud anymore, and we don't like the shows that they watch. But my advice is read their books, watch their shows, prompt for empathy, even something as simple as listen to the news together and say, how do you think that person feels? How would you feel? Do it in times that are not about them directly, and then they won't be defensive, and it builds their empathy muscles. Now, given the fact that at those moments when your child might have bullied a sibling or somebody out of the house, and prompting for empathy isn't going to work, then always fall back on rules. If we parented based on our children giving us the right answer, we would never discipline. If we waited for them to say, oh, yes, I know I did something terrible, I really deserve punishment. Oh, yeah, I know I'm way tired, I really should go to bed. It doesn't work that way. So the fact that a child says, well, I don't care that, I wouldn't care if my sister grabbed my arts and crafts project, it says, well, you might not care, but in our house, we don't take things that aren't ours. You need to go sit on the side. Always fall back on whatever your rule is. In our family, we don't talk that way to someone, etc. And also be careful of the fact, that little line there about bullies may have learned that bullying pays. Why do I say that? We're going to talk more about bystanders later. But when bullying happens, bullies get a message from the people who are in their audience. Those bystanders might be adults, and they might be kids, but they get a message. And if the message they get is green light, go ahead, keep doing it, then they've learned that bullying pays. Now, I'm sure that no one sitting in this room says, yes, I have given my child the green light to bully. I give the message, go right ahead. But you may have inadvertently given the message that it's okay by doing nothing. Because children, all ages, human beings, in fact, in general, read neutral as positive. If someone, if I'm speeding on my way home and nobody stops me, I assume it's okay to speed, as long as I don't get caught. Neutrality is viewed as approval. And that's children's nature. So if we don't say, please don't talk to your brother that way, then they think it's okay to talk to their brother that way. I'm not saying you have to punish every instance. I'm not saying you need huge consequences, but just don't ignore it. Bracket it in some way. Say, I don't like that. It bothers me. It makes me sad. I don't like it. Please, can you talk in a different way? Okay, victims. There's been endless amount of research to try to figure out, do short, tall, red-haired, freckled, glass-wearing, brace-wearing, learning disabled, which children get bullied? And there are only two characteristics that have held up in the literature. One that's physical and one that's personality. Anybody want to guess? Physical. What's the one physical characteristic that children are more likely to be teased if they have it? I'm sorry? Overweight. Absolutely. Overweight children are at greater risk for being teased. The reason the other physical characteristics don't hold up is the number one bullet on this slide, that the most, we have these handouts if you want to, they're sitting here, if people want copies in case anybody wants, what's up there is on the slides. Totally forgot. Reactivity is the number one issue. So it's not whether you're short or tall, it's when you're teased about it, because bullying is about power. Do you react in a way that says to the bully, got her, I got her? Now, I will not tell you my age, but I will tell you that the educational system was so bizarre and behind and politically incorrect when I went to school that everything was done in size order. I was number 2. Susie was number 1. I was the number 2. We sat, learned, graduated, sang, ate lunch, did gym, everything in size order. Everything was in size order. And I got teased for being short, but it didn't click. I didn't get bullied. People every once in a while, munchkin, shrimp, peanut, Yeah. But Susie was brutally bullied about her height. Why? I have a 5'2" tall mother. I think good things come in small packages. I had no expectation of ever being tall. I would have liked 5'2", but okay. But, I did not get bent out of shape if you called me peanut, munchkin, shrimp. But if you called Susie anything about her height, she ran crying out of the room, hysterical. Who'd they pick on? And you can imagine Dr. Novick's sons in middle school were not the biggest of the guys. So when my oldest son comes home and says, he describes the following scene, that in the lunchroom, some boys picked him up by his ankles and held him over the garbage can. Luckily, he inherited his mother's mouth, not her, as well as her size. And he said loudly and proudly, Novick? You're doing this to a Novick? Now, in Orlovsky, that would be an accomplishment. He picked the big football player guy. And I am 100% certain that if he had been sniveling and whining over that garbage can, don't do it, don't drop me, it's so dirty, yucky, it's done, every day. It would have been their game every single day. Now, those of you who have reactive children know that they don't wake up in the morning asking to be reactive children. You don't say, please, 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 overreact, be intense today. This is their factory wiring preset. They came this way. And you know that changing a reactive child to a calm, cool, easygoing child is like asking me to grow. You're asking somebody, literally, to challenge their biological inheritance. It's easier than asking me to grow, other than this way, but it's not easy. It's hard for them. It is hard for reactive children. We'll talk in a minute about how we can help them. But they react, and that fuels the cycle with the bully. And by the way, what do adults tell children who are getting bullied all the time? Ignore it. First of all, I'm reactive. I can't ignore it. Second of all, what happens when you ignore someone who calls you shrimp? They call you munchkin. And if that doesn't work, then they hold your lunch over here to see. A bully's going to try to provoke, especially if I've gotten a rise out of you in the past. I'm going to keep going. I know, it's like a roulette, or a slot machine. You pay off eventually. I'm going to keep putting my nickels in the same machine. It's my lucky machine. I'm going for it. So telling reactive children not to react, it's okay to tell them that, but you have to say it's going to take a while of that strategy before a bully stops. It's not going to happen magically. The other characteristic, the other type of child who is at high risk for being bullied are girls or cross-gender preferences and behavior. So girls who are particularly masculine, tomboyish, not into girly stuff, into sports and, hanging out with the guys, and even more so, guys who have feminine pursuits or feminine preferences. And I know from talking to, I'm not surprised, again, I'm the mother of sons, and I know from observing children today, talking to teachers today, that, for boys, the language of boys is sports. And so for boys who are not interested, not talented, not connecting in that way, things are harder for them socially. And so that makes them vulnerable. By the way, a child is 50% more likely to be bullied if they're alone. So simply being with one other person, a child who is alone on the playground is 50% more likely to be bullied, whereas a child who has at least one other buddy that they go look for, today they were looking for worms, goes and looks for worms on the playground, or, I don't know, studies spider webs. But if you have one pal, that's all you need. That's insulation. There are, by the way, a class of victims that are very confusing to both parents and to educators. They're called provocative victims, or sometimes they are called bully victims or aggressive victims. And these are victims who, they look just like everybody else, they're reactive, but about half the time when they're bullied, they're going to get aggressive. They're not going to run crying out of the room. They're going to punch you or yell right back at you. And so if we as a parent only see that part of the story, we see them yelling at their brother or them, trying to punch a sister, we think they're the aggressor when in fact they were provoked and this is their response to being bullied in some way. These are the children who on Monday they come home and tell us, so terrible, I was picked on. On Tuesday, they come home and say, I'm in trouble. I was in the rabbi's office. On Wednesday, everybody was mean to me. On Thursday, I'm back in the rabbi's office. They're alternating between being seen as the discipline problem and being seen as the victim. They are very, very challenging for parents and for educators to work on, and they need an enormous amount of support. Overrepresented in this group of children are children who have nonverbal learning issues, children who have social skills issues, and children who have language processing issues. It's not one-to-one. You can have a child who has those issues and is not a victim, but when you look at this group of victims, many of them struggle because the complexities of language and social situations may be hard for them to decode. And again, from a parent's point of view, an educator's point of view, one of the things you can most help victims with is giving them those social skills. Just before I get to technological amplification, if you have reactive children, and I've already said, you can't tell them not to react. So years ago, quite by surprise, I learned a trick to dealing with these children. And I learned it from one of these children who came into my office. She was different, totally amusing for me, a very tall third grade girl who was being brutally teased for her height. She was a very reactive girl, so if you just looked at her funny, she ran crying out of the room. And she comes in February into my office and says, Dr. Novick, I'm Abe Lincoln in the President's Day play. And I'm very, very nervous. I wear a stovepipe hat, and I have to stand really still, or the stovepipe hat falls off my head. This girl is being teased. I'm trying to work on her. I'm not being reactive. And she says to me, and a light bulb went off, she says, inside I am shaking, but I have to stand tall and straight and be Abe Lincoln and say my 2 lines, and then I don't have to be on the stage anymore. Then I can shake. So my light bulb goes off, and I said, so wait a minute, you mean you could be shaking on the inside and not on the outside? So could you do that when the girls tease you? Could you just keep your shaking inside? Keep your upset inside just for 2 minutes, and then you can go cry privately. And she said, yeah, I could do that. I said, just think Abe. Just think honest Abe. Whenever anybody teases you, tall Abe, be straight. Just think about having that hat on your head, and then go away. And she was able to do it. And it totally changed the dynamics in school because she wasn't reacting. And I've since done this with a number of other children where I've had them think about it. It's just a very slight difference between saying, don't show them your feelings, between saying, have the feelings, but act differently on the outside. So it validates your child's feeling. They hear, you're not telling me to be different. You get me, Mom, Dad. You know that that's how I feel. And sometimes you can give them stage business. Sometimes you can say to them, here's how you can act. Here's your excuse, allergies. I have to go to the bathroom and wipe my eyes. Here's how you can get away from a humiliating situation so you're not so reactive. A quick word about technology. Whether we like it or not, our children are connected in more ways than we can imagine, and I think that it's only going to get more. We are in the process, actually, of doing a study now that's scaring me a little bit because it's suggesting that cyberbullying and bullying are not on the same continuum. They're not the same children that engage in it. It's a whole different phenomenon. What we know about bullying may not hold for cyberbullying, but what we know about manners does hold. What we know about parenting and education does hold, and that means that I can't expect my children to be safe drivers if I don't teach them how to operate a motor vehicle safely. You can't expect them to be safe cell phone users if you don't teach them that it is intrusive to text people 300 times a minute, or there are certain words that are incendiary or that can't be understood without context. I find that although our children outstrip us and are smarter than us with the technology, they're unbelievably stupid about it. So consider the 13-year-old who was about to be brought up on charges for sending 3,000 text messages in 3 days, harassing a peer, who says to me, honor student, 13-year-old honor student, she says, Dr. Novick, they can't prove anything. I deleted them. And then at a Jewish day school in another town where a cyber stalker, someone has created an artificial account and is stalking the children in the 7th grade. The 7th graders say, oh, it's okay, we're on it. We figured out who it is. We know who it is. It's safe. And I'm like, what are you, CSI, FBI, CIA? What do you mean you know who it is? And then they say, yeah, but if we confront him, he's just going to wipe his computer clean. Then no one will be able to prove anything. I said, you can't wipe your computer clean. Oh, yeah, they can. And they believed. These middle school students at a Jewish day school in another town believed that even things they had put on the internet, they could take off and nobody would ever know. So that's what I mean by we have to educate them about the fact that there is real permanence here and that we have to be very careful about our use of the internet. Okay, so the third leg of the bully victim drama are the bystanders. And 85% of all children will be bystanders to bullying. I actually think that's an underestimate. I think between technology and the fact that I might not be there at the moment, but on the bus home or as we're walking to shul on Shabbos, you say, hey, do you hear what happened? Everybody knows about it, and these stories are witnessed. They tend not to be witnessed by us. The hot spots of bullying are the places where you have the least amount of adult supervision and adult eyes. It's bathrooms and hallways and stairwells and recess and bus or carpool or places that are more informal. Typically, bystanders do not get involved because they're afraid of becoming the victim. It's probably a poorly placed fear because bullies look for reactive and weak people. So somebody who does confront a bully, and when I say confront, I do not mean confront. I mean, that's not really nice. Why can't we let her sit with us? I mean gentle confrontation. But even that makes you look so different from what a victim looks like that I don't think a bully is going to say, oh, so sorry. Thank you for your correction.